Hey everybody, Sarah C. Netto here, and today I've got some revision tips for you. So, first things first, you finished a draft and you're probably super excited to jump into a revision. So whether this is your first revision, if this is a brand new rough draft that you maybe just wrote in NaNoWriMo, or for November National Novel Writing Month, or whether this is your millionth revision, or your 15th, or your 10th, or your 3rd, or your 2nd, whatever. Hopefully you can find at least one or a few of these tips handy today. I've got 7-ish for you. So first of all, you might be itching to start right away. You finished a draft and now you just want to dive in, and because you know it has problems, you know it has issues, and you want to just jump in there and fix it, right? That's a mistake, right? You're better off waiting. So first tip, you need to wait. It can be hard, it can be excruciating, but you have to wait if you're going to make it better. Why? If you know that if your draft already has problems, it already has issues, you've identified them, you know as you were drafting that it has problems, then why do you have to wait, right? It's a good question. Thank you. You have to wait because you're still in the same mode with the same eyes as when you just drafted that. It's so fresh in your mind that you're probably not going to notice certain things. You're going to end up maybe making some corrections, but you may not get the most effective pass with this revision if you're going into it in that same mode. So it's better off, minimum of a week, but hold your horses. Like maybe wait a month, a few weeks at a minimum. Sometimes the longer you wait, the more distance you have to it, the more it starts to look like something someone else wrote and not what you wrote. You don't remember exactly what you were thinking when you wrote every line. So because of that distance that you now have to it, it's going to be a lot easier to be brutal to your revision or to your draft. You are going to be able to look at it without mercy. You're going to be able to kill your darlings, and you're just going to be much more effective at editing it, at doing those big revision passes. So first of all, make sure to wait. Give it a little time. It's going to look so much different the longer you wait, and your revision will be more effective because of it. Number 2, so you might be wondering, okay, fine, I have to wait, but what am I going to do? I just wrote a whole rough draft. I don't really feel like writing another rough draft. Or maybe you do, maybe you don't. Number 2 is that you can take that time that you're waiting to refill your creative well. So a lot of times we're kind of pouring so much of ourselves, so much of our creative energy into our draft, into our rough draft, just getting things on the page. I know it's always really hard for me. Sometimes it's almost easier for me to revise than it is to draft. Go figure. But it's true. So when you've emptied so much of yourself into your draft, you need to fill yourself back up, right? What you can do are watch the movies you've been waiting on, binge some TV shows. You can read in your genre, read without outside of your genre, and of course try to read and watch as a writer, right? Try to do. Get enjoyment, of course. Don't like punish yourself, but try to refill your creative well in a way where you are learning all the time. What you can do with that waiting time is to be productive even when you're not writing, by sort of invigorating your creative life and getting new ideas and finding new things to write about. And so that can take, and you deserve a life. You've written a draft of a novel. Number 3. So now when you come back to your draft, you might notice that it seems way worse than you remember. Now, it's possible that it might actually be better than you remember. It's possible you thought it was shit when you first wrote it, and now it looks pretty good in comparison. I feel like a lot of times when we look back at an old draft, suddenly we see all these errors and you think like, I thought it was so good when I was writing it, or oh my God, this chapter has a problem, this chapter has a problem, this chapter has a problem. So when you first notice that and you have that shock of realizing just how much work you have to do if you actually want to revise this book, and get it to the state that it could actually get you an agent or an editor or whatever, get you into a contest, you're gonna have it can be really overwhelming. So one thing you can do is just to calm down and remember that the fact that you think that this looks bad means that you've learned something since you wrote it. Okay? So you have actually learned things in the meantime. You know more now than you knew then, which is why you think it sucks. Okay? Take it as sort of inspiration that you think it sucks. It means that you're better now than when you wrote it. So don't get discouraged if you see the pile of work growing before you, because you can actually handle it because you're better now than you were then. Number 4. So now maybe you've done your initial reread of your draft, you've seen all there is to do, and again, that can be overwhelming. Make sure you take notes. I don't think I've ever tried to revise anything without taking notes. Lots and lots of notes. Notes of what to do, notes based on the existing outline of the book, notes based on a new outline that I foresee for the book, notes about the characters, notes about the voice, notes about the structure, trying to scaffold something like the hero's journey or the 3-act formula on the book. And these revision notes are especially important for me because I tend a little more towards the discovery writer side of things rather than an outliner. So I usually have more work to do and I have to make sure the structure of my book still works. Tear it all down and rebuild it. So notes are really important for me. I mean, sometimes with a book, I might end up with 3 different Microsoft Word documents ranging from 5 pages long to 15 pages long. I think I've had one before that was like 20 pages long. So don't be afraid to take tons and tons of notes. I'm a firm believer in that you kind of put it down in writing. It's there for you in case you need to look back on it. Any ideas you get, brainstorming, anything, it's all going to be less overwhelming. I mean, you might think it's more overwhelming when you see 15 pages of notes that you've taken, but I think it's going to be a little easier to digest, a little easier to complete if you have all your ideas written down, maybe even a to-do list, chapter by chapter written down. Number 5, deadlines. So, I don't know if we all like deadlines, they can be scary things. But at the same time, if you never really give yourself any tight deadlines for a revision, you'll probably revise this book forever and ever and ever, and you'll just keep doing it, or you'll kind of put it off and you won't get around to it, you'll procrastinate. I do that all the time. So usually it's helpful to set some sort of strict deadline for this book. Is it that you want to enter Pitch Wars by a certain date? Do you want to enter Author-Mentor Match by a certain date? Do you want, or maybe you sent this to agents before and this is a revise and resubmit, an R&R. And so maybe you don't want to take too long in this revision because you want that agent to still be interested in it. So you might set 1, 2 month, whatever, 3 month deadline for yourself. You will probably be more productive and get more done and maybe revise a better book if you give yourself a time span to work under. Even if you're not a published author, you're not an agented author. I mean, I'm not, but I still give myself artificial deadlines that I can work towards because they help keep me accountable because I'm a huge procrastinator. Number 6, it's also going to be easier for you to revise if you're taking this one little baby step, one little baby bite at a time. So instead of kind of being overwhelmed with seeing, because you took 15 pages of notes, right, how much you really have to do, I encourage you to do a chapter by chapter to-do list or a section by section to-do list. And then feel free to just dive in at the part that you feel least afraid by first. I know for me personally, revising the first chapter is something I always end up doing the most. It's the chapter I always revise the most and rewrite the most. But at the same time, it's usually the hardest one to dive back into when I start a new revision or when I start rewriting it, because it's kind of like you feel like you haven't done anything yet and you feel like the whole novel is there ahead of you. So if you're making a chapter by chapter list and you notice some of the chapters maybe don't have as much to do, you might go to those first and try those suggestions first, fix whatever you have to fix there. And you can always go back to chapter 1 later or the last chapter later. You can jump around. When you're doing a revision, sometimes it can be helpful to go in kind of chronological order from chapter 1 up till the end, especially if you're like me and you might have some structural issues. It may be more helpful to do it that way, but at least take it a step at a time. So whether that's just chapter by chapter notes, but it also, you could do a pass based on various sort of topics. So you might do a point of view pass in which you make sure you correct any point of view errors or change anything that you wanted to change with point of view. You might do a character arc pass where you just focus on your character's sort of emotional journey and does that all flow. You might do a pass based on style, a pass based on subplots or something, a pass just based on setting or even certain motifs. You could go through every chapter and make sure how are you using color. So you could always do one little thing at a time and go the whole way through, or you could do chapter by chapter. It kind of depends on what you like to do and what works for you. Nevertheless, it's always going to feel less overwhelming and a little better to do one bit at a time. And lastly, number 7, I want you to remember that you are the master of this revision. So that sounds cheesy, but you are. Sometimes I think we forget, and I know I do, that you've created this world, you've created these characters, you've created this setting, and if this book hasn't been published yet, you can do whatever you want to it. You can do whatever you want. You can just delete this character. Yeah, they're not working, delete them. You can change the setting. You can change the dialogue. You can change the name of a character, because who cares, right? It's your book. So I think sometimes I've noticed that I get into this weird mindset where I think, well, in the last 3 drafts, 4 drafts, 15 drafts, whatever, this thing has been the case, right? The magic has worked this way, or this character says this at this time, whatever it is. And I get in that mindset and I think sometimes I keep just working around that one little thing that probably could be changed. So you've got to remember that you can literally change anything. No one will know or care. No one, maybe your critique partners or your beta readers or anyone else who's read it, they'll know, I guess, if you change something, but who cares? You can change whatever you want. Some people might call this the sort of kill your darlings idea, that you have to be ready to sacrifice things. But I think sometimes it's not even that something is dear or precious to us. It's not that we're attached to it emotionally and that's why we can't get rid of it. Sometimes it's just because we're used to it. We're just used to, this is the way I wrote it when I drafted it or when I first revised it. And because of that, you just keep it in there. So remember that you can literally change anything, and sometimes you should. Not everything, but some things. Well, that's it. My 7 initial revision tips, whether this is your first or 15 millionth revision. So hopefully you found something here to help you out. And if you're revising, I feel for you. I'm revising too. I have 3 novels to revise, so I'm jumping back and forth between them. Send some good thoughts my way. I'll send some yours. If you found something here to help you out, give it a like. So comment below if you have any other revision tips you want to share, or if you want to talk about your work in progress or your revision. So thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you guys next time with more writing tips and writing talk. Bye.